Hi, I'm Daryl, and welcome back to Sweet Hot Rods and Honey. Today, we're going to take a little break from our 51 Ford pickup project. We've got a few projects going on here in the garage, and we've been preparing to have our house repainted, so I'm going to have the garage repainted too. So I've been working on patching up messed up spots on sheetrock and filling in where the original spackling was applied, but they just didn't use enough spackling. Anyway, we're working on that, so in a few weeks we're going to have everything painted, and I think it's going to be like a light gray. But anyway, today we're going to work on the 2013 Toyota Avalon. I took the car in to get a front end alignment done at a garage, and they called me back, said, your pinion, the rack and pinion, is loose. And I believed them, but they also told me that it needed 3 new tires, and I knew that wasn't the case because the tires are not worn to be, to the point of being replaced. So I chose not to have the rack and pinion replaced or repaired, and I did not get new tires. So what I did do was I ordered a new rack right there, and I'm going to have it in the car today. So let me show you what I've been doing up until this point. We're measuring the toe angle for 2013 Toyota Avalon, and I've got 70 and what is that, about 3/8 in the back and about 70 in the front. So I've got this aluminum L channel strapped across the tire on both sides. I've calibrated and made sure that both measurement devices are measuring, equal amounts. So they're the same. So we have the front and the back. So there you have it. So I took the wheels off. I used some PB Blaster and put it on the bolts back there that the rack is mounted to. We've got to bring the sway bar, get that out of the way, so we got to remove this bolt. We have to remove the outer tie rod, so I put some PB Blaster on that. So I did that on both sides, took the wheels off. And luckily, this 2013 Avalon does not have a hydraulic power steering unit. It has an electric power steering unit. So that makes this install much easier. And what I did was we centered the inner tie rods to be basically straight. So made marks on here as reference, and we turned this, I think it was 2.5 turns, so center is lined up. So it should be right around center. I'm going to remove the old rack, and the wheels are straight when I came into the garage, so we'll use that as another reference. And I just want to make sure we can get this thing installed, initially at the straight point. One thing I did check is the sway bar mount, and that looks like it's in pretty decent shape. I have not checked to see if these bolts for the sway bar are loose or not, but it seems like when I go over a bump, I can hear a clunk. I don't know if it's because of this shock mount, or the shocks or if it was because of the rack being loose. I'm hoping it's just the rack being loose. So we'll find out. I don't know that we're going to be doing anything on the top side of the engine. Everything's going to be underneath the wheel wells. So I'm going to get started. Oh, before I do, I measured to make sure we've got all the tools. So we have a 17 millimeter and 19 millimeter. The 17 millimeter can disconnect the sway bar mount up here. The 17 is that front bolt or nut for the rack mount, and there's a 19 millimeter in the back. Also, the adjustment point for the inner tie rod is a 17 millimeter, and then also at the mount here is a 17 millimeter. So we got to pull the cotter pin out and start to loosen and disconnect these things. So I'm going to begin by removing the sway bar mount, and then just so we can get that out of the way. So there's a 17 millimeter. All right, those are pretty loose. Maybe not. Okay, let's have a look at this. This part was spinning. All right, well, let's get that back on. Now, we got the sway bar out of the way. It does, you will have to get these now tied up with a bungee cord. Next, I'm going to loosen up these tie rod adjustments, just so that when we take the rack out, I won't have to fight with that on the ground. So let's see. All right, it's loose. I should have done. Well, this rack is bad anyway. I should put that there. All right, so it's loose. I'm not gonna turn it out, but let me go do the other side, and then we'll take off the castle nut at the outer part of the tie rod end. So we have to take off this cotter pin. Where is it? I can't feel it. There it is. Cotter pin, and then use a 17 millimeter to loosen up this castle nut. And then we're going to use a, I forget what these are called, a compressor, and it will slide in on this top side and then push the bolt through. So it's a fair amount of pressure. Once you get, I don't like to just keep cranking on it, but what I do is get enough pressure on it and then start tapping with a hammer right against the this housing, and it usually pops. So let me get that off, and then we'll start. Well, we've got everything else loose. Then we'll start with the mounts for the rack. So I've got the cotter pin out, and we use a breaker bar just to get enough leverage, because I can't get a impact wrench under there. Let's see. Switch over to a ratchet. I think it's loose. obvious enough. Oh, I was tightening. This castle nut's pretty snug. It is coming loose. Oh, shit. I'm on the wrong bolt. Never mind. I was on the lower control arm. Don't want to do that. Oh boy. Alright, let's loosen it. These castle nuts aren't on real tight. What we do is take the castle nut off, flip it upside down, put it back on, and then we'll put on this, I guess it's a ball joint remover tool. Put the castle nut back on. Don't want to booger up any of these threads. I don't want to booger up the castle nut. I think I have some of this size, but I just don't want to mess it up. All right, so we have this one here. That's 19. Let me try to show you how it's inserted here. So we get it just the tip on this nut. Hopefully it won't mess things up. We get that inserted between this housing and then this pressure, and we start cranking on this bolt and it'll put pressure on it. Then we're going to start tapping on this housing. I don't like to put a tremendous amount of pressure because I'm afraid something's going to explode, like the tool or I don't know what, but anyway, let's give it a try. There it is, the 19. When it starts to feel like it's going to be just harder to crank on it, it's a good time to start tapping it. All right, that's it. And it popped loose. Take it off. Let's have a look at the end of this castle nut and make sure it's not marred. Yeah, it's got a little bit of marring. So let me screw it back on there all the way. Sometimes if it's really tight in there, it seems like on this Avalon, these bolts aren't corroding together and, you know, rusting terribly bad. But if you got a vehicle that they just don't want to loosen up, the thing to do is use some heat. Yeah, this calcium nut's a little buggered up on the end. Oh, I hate when that happens. All right, I'm gonna let that go for now. We've got bigger problems. Now we have the 2 inner mounting bolts and then the steering column to disconnect. The steering column shouldn't be a problem. I don't know how tough those bolts are gonna be for the mount of the rack. All right, let me get set up, and I think those were 17 millimeter. Well, several moments later, I finally got the driver's side mounting bolt out, and it was very difficult. I used PB Blaster on the nut, I used heat, and apparently it wasn't enough heat, so I put more heat on it. And then I used a combination of a 3/8 socket on a long 4-foot pipe, and I could get enough leverage by doing that with the wrench, and there was just not enough room here, so I could turn out this wheel to get some more room to ratchet out that off this nut. So now I'm trying to work at getting the bolt out, and it'll come out. It's got to come out. So I'm going to go over to the passenger side and try doing the same thing. But it probably took me, I don't know, a half hour working on getting this bolt out. All right, let's try a little bit of heat on here. Now put it right on that nut. And try not to burn the car down and burn the house down. Let's give that a try. Hoping and praying that we can get this thing off easily. Oop, I need my pipe. I can smell the rubber bushing melting. All right, let's see. If we can get this bad boy off. All right, this one feels like it's turning easier. There it goes. At the factory, they must have used a thread locker or something, because it is still pretty tight coming off. So I guess when I put it back together, I will use a thread locker. Let's see. We should be able to crank this off. Heat usually does the trick. Wow. And it is hot, because even the socket that was on it is burning my fingers when I touched it. Let's see. We'd have to wait a few minutes for this to cool off, and I'll take out that bolt. I hope that I don't have to remove the mounting bracket for the for the sway bar mount back there. This bolt is a bit long and there's just not quite enough clearance, but we'll see. Got both bolts, mounting bolts off. There's just enough room. I didn't have to mess with the sway bar mount, which was nice. Just had to wiggle it out, and that bolt just barely clears everything to pop out of the mounting hole. So the rack is loose. I still have to loosen up the steering column linkage. There is just one bolt, and let me go over there and do that. All right, so it's tough to get the camera in here to show you, but that's a 13 millimeter bolt right there. Once that's out, we've got to stick a screwdriver in, spread that spline apart, and then that should slide up there. The steering column is like a telescoping slider, so we should be able to pull that straight up, and then we can take the entire rack out. All right, everything is loose, and it's coming out. There it is. Let's lay it over here. I'm gonna lay them side by side. I'm gonna take some measurements. Again, I said I didn't loosen this. I just loosened it enough that we wouldn't have to struggle with it right now off the car. So yeah, this is the bottom. And driver's side, passenger side. Okay, one way. Well, let me back up. Before, when I took off the linkage for the steering column, I had to remove that bolt, that pinch bolt, all the way because that bolt rides in this groove right here. So it locks it in place once the splines are down. And again, getting back to taking these measurements, we did measure the front wheels before I removed anything or loosened anything. So we have those measurements. What I'm going to do is count the number of turns taking off these outer tie rod ends and record those for both sides, and then set up this bolt, to match those turns. Also, from the middle of the ball joint on the outer tie rod to the outer tie rod ball joint, so then when we return, put these outer tie rod ends onto the new rack, we're going to try to get that as close as possible, as well as count the number of turns and also the measurement between this clinch nut to the clinch nut. So there's a few measurements that I want to take, just because I don't want to change that the geometry of the toe end, even though we have the measurements already before we touched anything. So anyway, I'm just being overly cautious, and just to make sure that, because we don't have a definitive answer if from the end of this inner tie rod to the inner tie rod end over there matches that inner tie rod to this inner tie rod. So we'll see. We have the outer tie rod ends on. I could have reused the originals, but I decided since I'm putting a new rack on, I'm just going to put on brand new tie rod ends. So I went to the local parts store and got those. I counted 13 turns on the driver's side of the outer tie rod. So I did 13 turns here, and I got to tighten that up. And I also, well, I couldn't get this, the passenger side off without, a struggle. So what I did was I laid the original assembly on the floor and marked center to the center of the ball joint. And then I marked on the other side the same thing. The camera's not showing it up right there. It's the center. So I did that for the original, and then I matched the new one. Since the Rack and Pinion is now centered, the car would drive straight because I counted the number of turns on the steering column shaft, and then averaged the two and set it in the middle. From left to right in the middle of that. And so the old one should be centered because I pulled it out of the car and it was center. And so then I marked this. So that's about 13 turns in. So I think on both ends they had them turned in 13 revolutions. So I'm going to tighten up these ends and slide it in to the car. And then we'll start to bolt it together. We'll put the mounting bolts on, and I'm going to use red thread locker for them because I think that's what came from the factory. And then we'll get the ball joints in on the outer tie rods and get the sway bar assembled. So, it's just reassembling now. The new parts, the stock parts were 17 millimeter. The new one is larger, and I don't have a metric wrench, whatever size this is, so I'm going to use the cheater. So I'll snap this up. Now, not real tight. We'll do the final tightness on the car. But I just don't want it to shift or move when we're sliding in the rack in. All right, let's move this over. And we'll slide it in there. Maybe I should have slid this in from the driver's side since the steering column stud is there. Well, it came out this way, so shouldn't be all that bad. It certainly would be easier with two people, just to feed it through. Nope. And pull back out. The tire is slid down. Now the nice part about this rack is that it does not have a hydraulic, power steering. It's all electric. So the electric power steering assembly is up further on the steering column. So Don't have to worry about leaks with this setup, which is nice. All right. Jam up there. Get over there. It's almost there. All right, we got the passenger side slid in. And the driver's side is in. All right. Whew. Now, we'll work on torquing these bolts. And these certainly had some type of thread locker on them. If you can see the white stuff, that's right where the bolt was, and the inside of the nut. So we'll get it as tight as we can, but I'm going to use some red thread locker. This stuff from Loctite. It should work. Might be a little challenging to get this bolt through the slot, but let's see. Through. We'll get the other one and then I'll show you. Okay, we have both bolts through. Haven't put the nut on yet. There's just barely enough room between the head of the bolt and the sway bar mount. But there's the tip. And let me get some thread locker on there on both sides. We're going to tighten them up. And then we'll get the steering column connected. So we've got the bolts in to mount the rack with some Loctite thread locker. Now we have to put a little bit of anti-seize on the steering column shaft on those splines so it's easier to get off. Let me try to reach down around there. Doesn't take a whole lot, but I just want to get the whole round surface covered. All right, that should be good enough. We'll slide the steering shaft down. Okay, so I just had to get in there a little bit better. So we'll get this locking nut on that spline. Let's see, is it lined up? I put it down too far. There we go, that's better. It's the bolt's riding through that groove. And so that is a 13 millimeter. this, we can put our ball joints on. Oops. Castle knight onto the ball joint. That's about it. All right, now time for the ball joint. And I'm going to add a little bit of thread locker on the inside where that ball joint seats. I'm gonna get a little bit of light on there. All right, now, whoops. Castle nut. And I don't know what size this is. This is a 17 millimeter. Let's see. This should be, don't really have to crank hard on this nut, but it should be quite firm. And new. See, where is oh darn it, I should have located, let me loosen it up, locate the hole for the cotter. Let's spin it around some. All right. Just turn this out. The hole's got easy access. There we go. Okay, that side is done. We just have to tighten up the adjuster. Might as well do that right now while we're here. Right over here. And that one is an adjustable wrench. Because I don't know what size that was. And this is good enough. Okay. Don't need two nuts on here, but I put both on because I had them. All right, now. Okay, it looks like driver's side, we just have to put this the sway bar mounting bracket back on this guy. I'm going to go over to do the passenger side, and then I'll show you what we have after I get it all connected up. So we got all the parts put on, everything's tightened up. We got cotter pinion, ball joint. We tighten up our two mounting brackets. We tighten back up the sway bar we had to get that out of the way. And we have the steering column attached and tight. Passenger side is ready to go as well. I'm going to put these tires on, and then we're going to do another measurement of the front end alignment. All right, I got the wheels on. I got my measurement devices again. I got the exact same setup on the opposite side, and I've clipped onto this top side, so on both of them. So I measured 70 and about 3/16 on the back edge and about 70 inches on the front edge. This distance from the center line, center of the hub, to that point is about 14 inches. So here's the diagram I have. This is 70 inches, the back is 70 and 3/16. Half of 3/16 is 3/32. So that's the amount of toe in for each wheel. So doing the math, 3/32 of an inch over 14, the arc sine of that is about 0.38 degrees. And I don't know exactly what the Avalon specs are, but I did a ChatGPT and it told me typically it's between 0.05 degrees and 0.15 degrees. So this toe in is, there's a little bit too much toe in. So I think for this video, we are, we might as well just wrap this up. I'm going to do a more accurate measurement, or, well, I don't think that I'm going to have the front end aligned again, because these are the measurements that I got after I had it aligned. So you saw that earlier in the intro to before we pulled out the rack. Anyway, we're going to wrap this up. We got the rack and pinion in. We've got the new outer tie rod ends in. I could show you how it was disassembled and reassembled. It's not too tough. Again, it was a little bit easier because we didn't have to worry about any hydraulic lines from power steering. That's all. This has an electric power steering box. So I'm going to take it for a test drive and see how it goes. I'll list in the comments how things go, and also if I do really need to put a turn in on the tie rod end to bring that closer to that 0.05 degrees or between 0.05 degrees and 0.15 degrees. So we'll try to get in that ballpark. Anyway, thanks again for watching, and we'll get back on the pickup and see how that's going. So, all right, thanks again, and have a good one. We'll see you next time. Bye.